Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I shall be sharing my thoughts on the latest episode of The Walking Dead, Do Not Send Us Astray. As always with these reviews there will be full spoilers included throughout, so please don't carry on watching if that will be a problem. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin. For me, this week's instalment of The Walking Dead had an awful lot in common with the entry that came immediately before it, in that it was fun, action-packed, a bit dumb, and also littered with a lot of problems. I don't think this episode is as good as a lot of fans are making it out to be. In fact, I actually think episode 12 is much better, but it did do a solid job of showing the Saviours attacking the hilltop with their walker-infested weapons. This entry really wastes no time in getting things going, as Simon arrives on the hilltop's doorstep almost from the get-go. The back and forth between Maggie and Simon was on par with some of the conversations had between Rick and Negan, and I'm glad that finally Maggie was given something else to do rather than just babysitting the prisoners. Speaking of prisoners, I have to say I was a bit surprised that Simon didn't give a shit when Maggie threatened to kill all of them. Maggie's ace up her sleeve turned out to be a complete dud, as Simon seemingly disowned his group of ex-soldiers without a care in the world. Honestly, I found this a bit hard to believe, especially seeing as only a couple of episodes ago, Simon suggested attacking the hilltop to Negan when he realised that the prisoners who Maggie held captive were the people that he had been in charge of. Yet now he couldn't care less. It really didn't make a lot of sense. I know Simon is being presented as a bit of an unhinged villain at the moment, but I still think him abandoning his people is quite out of character. Anyway, moving on from Simon to the actual firefight itself, which saw the Saviours and the hilltop battle it out. That was until Maggie's tactics allowed her community to get the upper hand and send Simon and his soldiers running. There were a few moments that I liked in particular that took place during this encounter, as well as a few that I didn't, but I'll start with the positives. Firstly, I really enjoyed the sequence in which the people of Hilltop retreated into the big house, only to then completely blindside Simon and the Saviours. Yes, it was a bit stupid to see Simon whistling in the dark, essentially giving away his group's position, but it did make for a great shot when the lights on the Hilltop's vehicles burst on, much to the horror of the Saviours. It was also great to see Rick arrive just after this moment and go into full badass mode. Seeing him appear during the middle of the battle really got me pumped, and thankfully this time his aim was better than it was when he was trying to kill Negan last week. Furthermore, I also thought that Dwight shooting Tara in her arm in order to prevent Simon throwing a weapon at her which was covered in walker blood was a neat little moment, and in my mind there's no doubt that Dwight did this in order to save her. Upon viewing this scene for the second time, I could see that Simon was about to throw his weapon at Tara, so in stepped Dwight to shoot her in a non-lethal area, which resulted in her falling to the floor and Simon moving on due to thinking that Dee had taken care of her. I'm sure there are some people out there debating whether Dwight's arrows were also covered in walker blood, but I don't really think this was the case at all. I mean, if Dwight wanted Tara dead, he could have just let Simon kill her, so I am 100% confident that he actually saved her. As previously mentioned, however, there were a couple of things that I disliked about this battle sequence, with my main complaint being that I couldn't really see what the hell was actually going on. I said I had to watch Dwight shoot Tara twice, and in fact I had to watch the majority of the firefight more than once due to not being able to tell who was shooting who. I find this happens a lot during The Walking Dead's nighttime fight scenes. I had the same issue during the mid-season finale, and even with the brightness on my TV turned way up, I still struggled to tell the difference between the Saviours and Team Rick and Maggie. I've also got to say that the moment in which Daryl rode in on his motorbike with an SMG strapped to it just felt like another excuse for the producers to get Norman Reedus on a bike. It was a bit too cringy for me, but I'm sure Daryl Dixon fans loved it. Lastly, this complaint doesn't just apply to the opening fight, rather the entire episode, but I'm not really a fan of Morgan having hallucinations of the saviour that Henry killed. I mean, I'm not really keen of hallucinations found in The Walking Dead in general, as I think all the previous ones have been pretty terrible. I mean, we've had an angelic version of Laurie that Rick saw which was pretty silly, Tyrese also spent half an episode hallucinating which didn't interest me at all, and I also didn't enjoy seeing Daniel Salazar talking to his dead wife in Fear the Walking Dead. I think the only hallucination I can say I really liked was when Daryl imagined himself talking to Mel in the episode Chupacabra, but I feel that's only due to the fact that Michael Rooker has such a great presence every time he's on screen. Overall, I find visual hallucinations to be very cliché, and I'm hoping Morgan doesn't keep seeing this guy every single episode from now on. After the opening battle there was a brief bit of respite as the characters were afforded a moment to collect themselves. One of the biggest surprises for me during this part of the episode was that I actually found myself starting to like Tara. Yes, The Walking Dead has done the unthinkable. A couple of weeks ago it made me begin to like Jadis, and now Tara. All that's left for the show to now do is make me like Enid. Getting back to the topic at hand, Tara and Daryl engaged in conversation, with Tara coming out looking a lot better than Mr. Dixon due to her acknowledging her mistakes she made in the past. She admitted that she had been wrong in her repeated attempts to kill Dwight, and even went on to make a point of saying that like Dwight she was once on the wrong side of the battle against Rick when she didn't want to be. In addition, she explained to Daryl how Dwight had saved her and in turn him when he leaded the Saviors away from the swamp last episode. Now this piece of dialogue doesn't make me suddenly forgive all the hypocritical and downright annoying things that Tara has done over the course of the last season or so, but it is certainly a start. And like when Rosita realised that she acted too rashly in trying to rush into Negan's base with Sasha, this may also be a turning point for Tara, and one that makes me a bit more willing to get behind her character in the future. Daryl and Tara weren't the only ones who were seen having a good old chat, as we also checked in on Carol and Tobin. Seeing this conversation play out made me realise that Tobin hadn't gotten anywhere near as much screen time as he deserved during his stint on the show, as he managed to come off as rather likeable and also made me laugh a few times during their exchange. Carol also appeared to have her guard down and seemed real, with her being a far cry from the mopey solitude-seeking figure that she was when she left Tobin a parting letter before running off to live outside the kingdom. I made a reference just now to Tobin's stint on the show, and I use that phrase because, as I predicted pre-season, he ended up biting the dust this episode and succumbing to the effects of a knife being covered in Walker blood. The same thing also happened to a number of civilians staying inside what used to be Gregory's mansion. I actually think that it was a mistake for Carol to put Tobin down once he had turned, as they could have used him to aid their war effort. I mean, as a walker, he was a complete machine. I think he killed at least 3 people during his hunger-fueled rampage, and there seemed to be no stopping him until Carol plunged her iconic knuckle duster knife into his skull. Forget having an army, just let him deal with Negan. He was one of the most badass walkers the show has had, and at least the actor who played Tobin got to have a decent run as a zombie. In addition, having infected civilians turn throughout the night helped to add a much needed bit of horror to the show. In fact, it reminded me of the flu outbreak back in season 4, when people were dropping like flies, and it's great to see walkers presented as a real danger once again. Kudos for Rick for working out how the people came to be infected, although I still think it may have been a bit of a long stretch for him to equate Negan's bats being covered in blood to all the Saviours lacing their weapons in Walker blood as well. Unfortunately, there was a moment after Rick figured this all out that I absolutely hated, and that was when this guy, whoever he is, started crying after realising that he was infected, begging someone to kill him. I mean, first off, who the bloody hell is he? I don't care about him and I've never seen him at all before. It just felt weird to me that the show tried to make me care and make it out to be a sad moment that he was dying. I'll tell you now, it wasn't a sad moment, instead it was just incredibly odd and kind of pointless. One of the last characters I want to mention is Henry, who absolutely messed everything up by letting the Saviour prisoners escape. Now I don't know what it is about the show that makes all the children on it to be unlikable idiots who always do the exact opposite of what they should, but Henry really didn't do himself any favours when he decided to open the makeshift prison gate in order to find out which Saviour it was that killed his brother. The stupid thing about this is that he could have just done the same thing standing outside the gates anyway. I mean, he had a gun on him the whole time, so why not just start his countdown and point his gun at the Saviours while standing on the other side of the fence? I am willing to give him some benefit of the doubt as he is a kid who probably didn't think his actions through, but it doesn't take away that it was still quite a dumb moment. Finally, I want to mention that whoever this lady is who was speaking to Sadiq at the start of the episode is an utter bitch. I'm glad Sadiq showed that he had some backbone by standing up to her, because she was just being a dick pretty much the entire time she was on screen. Perhaps she's the wife of this guy and we will get to see their epic backstory unfold next season. Wow, I really should stop giving Gimple ideas. Anyway, like I said at the start of this review, Don't Lead Me Astray overall was a solid episode. It had some decent action moments and some interesting character development, but it's also bogged down by the usual problems that seem to plague The Walking Dead. It's definitely not as good an episode as some fans are suggesting, but from start to finish I did enjoy watching it, and if the next few episodes can keep this up, then the second half of Season 8 could end up being a pretty decent conclusion to the All Out War saga. So there you have it as my views on the latest episode of The Walking Dead. As always, please let me know your thoughts below. Did you enjoy this episode or did you dislike it? Until next time, thank you very much for watching and goodbye.